Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Southern Outdoorsman Podcast. We're very excited because today we're coming at you from beautiful Pikeville, Tennessee, very scenic area up here, and we're talking to a Southern bow hunting legend, Mr. Bobby Worthington. Bobby, how are you?
Doing great. Appreciate y'all coming. Welcome to my shotgun humble home.
Man, we appreciate you inviting us up here. This is impressive, man. You got an awesome property and an awesome house and an awesome trophy room that we're recording in. Jacob, how are you?
Doing well. I'm just looking around at all the big bucks, and it's like I've seen photos of all these deer, but it's different when you actually get to come in person and see them all. Because again, it's super impressive, especially some of your big Tennessee bucks, but also some of the bucks you've killed out of state, like in Illinois too. So, Bobby, we've had you on quite a few times before in the past, and I would love to learn something about you that really we've never discussed, and I've never really heard you discuss on other podcasts, which was when you started really bow hunting hard in the 70s. We were kind of talking about this beforehand. It wasn't very common for a lot of people to bow hunt, especially before, guys were, before a compound bow was ever developed. Everybody was shooting recurves or longbows, and it was really tough back then. And it seems like that's when you were cutting your teeth bow hunting. Can you talk a little bit about what was it like growing up in the 70s bow hunting, and how different it was compared to how majority of the other people were, hunting in this general area of Tennessee?
Well, I was grown by the 70s, but, we got started bow hunting then. About everybody gun hunted, and tree stands and compound bows was unheard of. And really, rightfully so, it was a big deal to kill any deer with a bow and arrow back then. You was pretty well wandering around the woods and trying to stalk them and get a shot, or sometimes you'd set up on the ground somewhere, Fred Bear was a big deal back then. There was an American Sportsman TV show, narrated by Kurt Gowdy, and a lot of times they'd have other things. They'd have skin or a lot of different fishing, but about once a month or something, they'd have Fred Bear on there hunting, and he'd be killing grizzly bear or lion or something. So I just got fascinated with bow and arrows. Matter of fact, that back then, I think my daddy built that for me in the 60s. That he learned how to make a recurve bow, and he made that for me. And I was really fascinated with bow hunting from watching Fred Bear, and I decided then at a young age in the 60s, late 50s, that I wanted to be an archer, a bow hunter, instead of just gun hunting, and it was because of him. Yeah.
So did your dad grow up bow hunting at all, or did he just like to build bows?
He was never had education. I think he went to the second grade, and I think most of the time then he spent it in the boiler room with maintenance workers. Poor guy couldn't read or write, but he was really good with his hands. He could make stuff, and he come up with how to make a recurve bow somewhere. I don't know, he may have come up with it on his own, because a lot of people brought stuff to him to make and to fix. And he was that type of guy, but like I said, he never learned to read. I remember he's trying to learn to read, but it never did take. We'd be driving around, and Mom would be trying to help him read a road sign, stop, or just simplest thing, Pikeville. He'd try to spell it out, and he's like me. It never did take much. It didn't take much of me either. So, but he could do stuff, and so he loved that show too. And later on, he got to bow hunting too. He mostly small game hunted. Of course, there wasn't many deer way back there, so we'd squirrel hunt and rabbit hunt, mostly squirrel. And then they got to be a hunting number of deer at Catoosa Wildlife Managed Area, about an hour and a half from here. And he had a buddy or two that go out there hunting, and he started going with them. But he never had much success, even gun hunting. They just wasn't a large number of deer. And then there was a few old mountain deer around here on the mountains, we got to hunting them. But like I said, it was a big deal just to kill a deer with a bow and arrow. And then in the 80s, I got to killing some pretty big deer. And every time I would, people would say, that's a once-in-a-lifetime deer. And really it was. I mean, my trophy room is not impressive by today's standards. You can go to people that's got a wall full of 200-inch deer. But when I killed these, there wasn't no food plots, and people wasn't managing. They was shooting any buck was a trophy with a gun or a bow because there was so few of them. So they wasn't letting them get old, and they wasn't really no nourishment for them. They was eating acorns, and when acorns didn't hit, they didn't have nothing. And of course, acorns only, was there in the fall anyway. So back when I was killing these big deer, that was a big deal, especially on wildlife managed area and in the big woods. But nowadays, it's not a big deal nowadays. A lot of people's got a lot more impressive deer than I have, but it's in a different setting now. They manage their property exclusively. They can afford. Back then, people couldn't afford to buy a hunting property. We was just buying property to try to maybe farm or make a living. But nowadays, they can manage. They can buy it and manage it and feed them all the high nutrient foods they want, like I do when I'm consulting, teach them how to do that and protect them, and not just let anybody come in and shoot the best deer. Let the best young deer go, But these deer, I was often thinking that some of the deer I've killed today, they had the genes and the ability, even the Tennessee deer, to be 200 inches if they had all that high nutrient food. Generally speaking, I think a mountain deer is 20 inches smaller than 20% smaller inch-wise than a farmland deer in any area. And then you take these in Tennessee compared to the Midwest, you got another 20 inches off of them. So you take some of these deer and you put them in the Midwest where they've got all the food they want to eat, and you've got some real giant deer, But like I said, back then it was unheard of.
You mentioned about small game hunting when you were growing up. You still got a pen full of beagles outside right now. What was your favorite thing doing growing up when y'all were a family small game hunting? Like, I'm just curious what you gravitated to the most. Was it the squirrels or rabbits or what?
Well, we had a better number of squirrels. Back then, there wasn't as many rabbits in the big woods. Now, you could go to somebody's farm, which around here it was mostly cattle farm, wasn't much truck farm and crops. You go to somebody's farm, and if back then they'd let their fence road open, you could get after some rabbits, and I always had some beagles. But now when I was a young man at home, I didn't have beagles. Daddy had a few coon dogs, but we'd rabbit hunt with a coon dog, if he had one to run a rabbit, because we didn't know nothing about no beagles either way back there when I was young. But times was hard. He'd have 2 or 3 hounds. Sometimes he couldn't afford to feed them. He'd load them up and take them to the city dump. Said, I'll go back and get you. Come back here and get you dogs when I can afford to buy a dog food. So we'd go back and get them there. They'd forage around best they could, at the city dump. Everybody dumped the garbage on the side of the mountain, so they'd something for them to eat. And sometimes they'd be pretty poor the time we went back and got them. But then we'd have something to hunt with again, It was an interesting lifestyle. Nothing like today.
Do you remember when you went on your first deer hunt?
Yes, I do. Yeah. Preacher at the church took me. His name was Paul Cagle, and he called it the Park V, Fall Creek Falls State Park, most beautiful state park probably in the United States, and the most visited for sure. We've got 3 waterfalls over 300 foot high. It's just unbelievable. But part of it allowed deer hunting, but it wasn't developed like it is now. There wasn't buildings and welcome centers and all that. But we went on the V of the park fence, and I'd already started shooting competition archery as a kid. We had a local club on the side of the mountain, and I was shooting fairly well. And of course, I was sitting there with a little coat, I think, a little recurve bow with bright white limbs and a little fancy riser and probably 25 pound. And I seen 2 deer off in the distance, maybe 50 or 60 yards. I was standing on a stump for some reason. That was the thing. You get on a stump, I guess, so you could see good. Of course, you could see a deer, if he's on the stump or not. But I was standing on a stump about that high on the park fence, on the V of the park fence at Fall Creek Falls State Park, and seen my first 2 deer, I guess, ever. But they was too far, so I started watching around for something closer. The chances of a deer coming up within range, standing in them open woods on a stump with a white bow and no doubt didn't have camouflage. Might have had military camouflage, you know, but that I remember not. The chances of that's why it was a big deal, you know, just to kill a doe or any deer. And a young buck, of course, they're as easy, old doe's easier to kill, but a young buck was a real trophy back then, you know. Hunting was very difficult. But even before deer hunting, when I was just small game hunting, I was fascinated with deer hunting someday when they got to be a number of them. And every squirrel I stalked, I guess, was a deer, you know. In my mind, you know, I was getting ready for it, you know. But I learned to read sign and learned to read the woods and the lay of the land. And then I coon hunted and trapped some. Everybody back then coon hunted. Everybody back then hunted. You know, time I got to high school, there's quite a few deer around. Everybody deer hunted. First guy I ever met that didn't deer hunt or didn't hunt nothing was in college. And I asked him what he enjoyed hunting most. He said, I don't hunt. And I said, well, you don't hunt what? He said, I don't hunt nothing. I said, what are you talking about? I thought he was communist. I told everybody, I said, hey, guy's a communist or something. He don't hunt. I believe that too. But I shunned him pretty bad there. But anyway, that's just the way it was. Everybody here hunted. But, you know, didn't hunt trophies, just hoping to even see a deer was a big deal. Yeah.
What was it like, again, because I'm really interested in kind of seeing what the culture of deer hunting was like, or just hunting in general back then. Opening day of deer season, was that like a local, almost like a little holiday? Like, would people like get out of school or anything for that, for like opening day? Or like, what was like the culture like, especially like around gun season when I guess more people were trying to get in the woods?
Kids got out of school for a lot of stuff back in. Harvest crops certain times of year to kill hogs. Or, I mean, it wasn't a big deal to miss school back in, you know, because you was trying to make a living, trying to live, you know. And some people would miss school to go deer hunting, and that was good. And most of the deer hunting around here was either driving deer. Very few people still hunted or stand hunted. They'd get a big bunch of drive deer, but there was so much big woods, you know. Usually Bowater Land Company owned thousands and thousands of acres of paperwood pines. That's where a lot of the hunting took place because it was open to anybody. But back then you could, if you've seen where a deer was, you didn't have to ask permission. Everybody hunted other people's property. It wasn't no big deal. It wasn't like it is now until the foreigners bought some land and moved in, you know. Mostly Yankees. And then they stopped a lot of the hunt. They didn't want people on their land. Of course, they was used to that up there. It's our culture, and this is our culture. But they would dog deer a lot too. It wasn't legal. It never was legal in Bledsoe County. It was legal further south, you know, and still is. They do it still in Alabama, maybe some parts of Florida and stuff. But they would still do it. They didn't care if it was legal or not. They'd have a gun loaded with buckshot, and they'd turn them dogs loose. There was a few real characters around here that was real mountain men. And you weren't going to stop them dogging deer. You'd be well advised to use a game warden and just stay away from them. Because they had, you know, you couldn't hardly hear them talk. You couldn't hardly understand their words. They had old southern drawl on here. I hunted with a few of them. William Manry was one of them. And Roger Williams, you know, they're going to hunt their own way. And they did. And that was just a culture. They was hunting for meat. You know. So that's changed a lot. You know, whitetail land consultant now, and people setting up their properties and buying properties just to deer hunt. Back then, I didn't know nobody that could afford that. It probably wasn't as many people could afford that. And then they understand what crops is needed, what times of year, and how to make the bed and cover close to the crops, and they get all the nourishment they want. So it's been good for the hunting. We've got 200-inch deer. It's not uncommon to see or kill a 180 or a 200-inch deer now, where back when I done most of my trophy hunting, it was just unheard of to, I mean, 140-inch deer was about all you could ever expect. That's about all a big woods mountain deer would end up being. And still today, actually, big woods mountain deer, most people find a big shed and they think, next year that'll be a great buck, and it may be 135, 140 inch shed. But if it's a big woods deer, a Tennessee deer, that deer may be 7 years old. Most Tennessee deer never get out of the 140s. The ones I've killed is exceptional, but I have watched a lot of 140s grow up and studied them, hoping they'd get big, and they never would. And then you go on looking for something else. You would not believe the number of deer that I've watched grow up and die that I hoped would develop into something that didn't. But I learned a lot because I studied them. I'd study their movements. I'd study how they'd use the land and the landscape and the wind. And then if they got old enough, I'd kill them. If they didn't, then so be it. I learned. It was good. It was educational. So I think you learn a lot more by not shooting the deer that you've studied for a while, and not just shooting him the first or second year. I think you learn a lot more by studying them.
And a lot of what you've talked about so far is woodsmanship and like that skill set of like reading sign, like you were talking about early on, from a young kid in high school getting into college, that really understand the lay of the land and a sign you're looking for, and just the woodsmanship aspect. Do you think a lot of that came about from small game hunting and just spending a lot of times in the woods, and then as deer get more and more populated, kind of understanding what that sign looked like and be able to read that on the fly?
Yeah, back then a lot of times we didn't have a TV. And if you did, you couldn't watch it. It looked like it's snowing all the time. That's what it looked like. And then the picture would roll. Of course, kids don't know about that. You'd have to get up there and adjust it, and it was just awful. And I remember when it'd go off like at 8 o'clock at night or something, But you had a radio. You listen to Grand Ole Opry or something. But back then you couldn't sit here for hours and have real entertaining shows to watch. First TV program I ever heard about was Bonanza. Daddy come home all excited. He'd been to town. His sister had got a TV, and he's telling us about watching this show in a box, this picture show in a box, and people talked about Little Joe Cartwright. He said that was his favorite. He said he would laugh all the time. And wow, we never knew we couldn't even imagine the TV, And then finally we got to go watch it a little bit, but didn't have that, didn't have cell phones. So what did you do? You got out and wandered around. You got out and you roamed around the woods, and you'd find something that you'd be curious about, animal sign, animal droppings, animal tracks, try to figure out what kind of track it was, and try to figure out why it was where it was. So time in the woods is so important. Time at any task. There's a few words that over the years, and I really stress on them in my new book, Final Quest, but there's a few words over the years that I have found as just paramount in any activity and in any task. And I write some philosophy stuff, and I'm wording a few, 5 or 6 words, but one of them is familiarity. Time devoted to a certain task. Sometimes I could buy something and get instructions, and it would just be Greek to me at first. But I would read it and read it and read it, and finally stuff would begin to come to light. And I would read it until I understand it from really well. Familiarity is paramount, and that's one of the words that's important that people don't understand the value of. They want to just rush into something, and if they don't succeed in a few days or a week, then they're off to something else. That type person will never be real successful. He'll never be real well known at anything. So here's a sample. Say you shoot a deer and he goes a long way and you trail him around and further than you thought. So often he'll take you to places that you say, man, if I knew this the first of the hunt, look at all this buck sign and all these trails. And you'll get real excited and say, I wished I knew this was here. Well, if you had devoted yourself to enough time, you would have. It's because you did not spend enough time out there scouting and looking and trying to understand. I can take you anywhere in these woods, and we can just sit down or stand there for a long time. Well, did you notice this a while ago? Did you notice this deer trail here? So one of the words that I think is really important that people don't understand is familiarity. It is very, very important. And one of the in my new book and in Passionate Quest too, I talk about it, is time devoted on the stand to hunting. I talk about 3 major tactics and a lot of other things, but nothing is as important as time in the woods. Nothing. Don't matter if there's a low deer density. Don't matter if you're not even in the right tree. If you will go anywhere in the deer woods and spend 30 days sitting in the same spot, you're going to see a giant. So time is very important. That's getting off into another little topic. But yeah, because we didn't have anything to do. Play with our dogs, had chickens, gather eggs, and work. Then when the chores was done, then you had some downtime. And you didn't sit and watch TV or play with a phone. We always, and the woods was right outside our yard. We always got out and wandered around the woods. And supper time comes, or chore time, we'd hear Mama hollering at us, time to come home. But we could hear, we might be up beside the hill or ridge or mountain. We could hear her. Of course, to head home, you get a good thrashing. If by her, then when Daddy got home, he'd buggy whoop you long ways if you was late, because Mom would be scared to death. So, my health, things have changed. And one of the important words that I've come up with that people don't really understand is expectations. I'm teaching archery to a lady friend of mine. Her husband's a good friend of mine, and me and her's been doing some filming for this new hunting show, Chasing Giants TV, and was filming at the range one day, and she shot really well. I mean, she just, things clicked for her. She had a great droop or two, and then she got to shoot normal for a beginner. Somebody had shot a bow once or twice, and I said, listen, your expectations are out of line with reality. So sometimes we will do real well at something when it's new to us, and we're really excited, and the subconscious takes over and figures out how to do something. But that won't work all the time, and it won't work under a stressful situation. But our expectations get out of line with reality. For instance, a lot of my clients hire me to go to public hunting with them. They say, we want to see how you find a stand site and how you set up, and then I'll show them. And let's just say I hadn't had this to happen, but I know it will, and it may have without them saying anything. Let's say they go out and find a great funnel and set up wind direction, everything right, hunt deer in the rut, use all of my key points, and they don't kill a giant. Don't even see one. You know what often happens is they go chasing rabbits down empty holes. That's 2 of the points I'm making. Familiarity, time devoted to a task is paramount. They'll go chasing down rabbits down. They'll read what somebody else says, maybe about hunting a bed, one single bed, or acorns, hunting certain, and they'll start that, and then that won't do no good. Then they'll go off somewhere else. Well, the initial technique that they was told may have been right, but what was wrong was not. They were wrong, but they wasn't wrong in their technique. They was wrong in their expectations of their technique. So if you go hunting a wildlife managed area or the big woods, you've got to understand that you're not going to, you're taking a challenge on, a real challenge, and you're going to have to be a woodsman, and you're going to have to learn to read the woods, and you're going to have to learn woodsmanship. A very famous hunter has killed a lot of 200-inch deer with his bow up in Ohio. A good friend of mine, I really like him. He told me, he said, Bobby, I really struggle with hunting the big woods. And I said, maybe you don't struggle at all with hunting the big woods. Maybe you struggle with your expectations of hunting the big woods. And he said that very well could be true. And the trouble with your expectations being out of line with reality is that you may very well have the way to success right in front of you, but because of your expectations were not correct, then you will go looking for something else, and you will not devote enough time to it. So that's two important words. Another one that I talk about a lot in my new book and really stress is the mathematics of something. And I tell in there that you may have heard trophy whitetail bow hunting called a lot of things, but you bet you've never heard it called this, and that's exactly what it is. It is mathematics. It's all about finding ways to increase your odds that a giant buck will walk in front of you. And I stress that when I talk about the funnel aspect of it, hunting funnels. And I say, you may spend a lot of time in the woods and find a great trail with a lot of rubs on it, and you might set up on it, and in a week or two, if you're hunting the right time and the right way, a trophy buck might come through and you might kill it. But what if you find 2 such places and 3 such places or 4 such places? Now, if you hunt all 4 of them at the same time, you have quadrupled your chances of success. You have quadrupled your odds, your mathematical odds, that you will kill a buck there 4 times as much. So bow hunting trophy whitetail, as well as most any endeavor in life, is the mathematics of it. Finding ways to increase the mathematical odds of success. Years ago, a guy writing a book wanted me to write a few chapters in it. He had several of us writing chapters in it. He mentioned this one guy, and I said, I don't believe I'd use that fella. He said, why? And I said, I don't believe he's doing things right. And he said, well, what makes you say that? He's the nicest, most humble guy, and he's killed these giant bucks. And I said, looky here now. I said, let's just look at the mathematics of it. This guy is half the age of me, you, Roger Rothair, Gene Wenzel, Barry, some well-known great hunters, and he's killed double the giant deer that we have. I said, the mathematics don't add up. And sure enough, a little later on, he was busted. It was he was a fraud. Yep. So in life, I always look at the mathematics of a thing. And sometimes, if you're going into a business adventure or you're going out there to try to kill a giant buck, sometimes you want so bad for 4 + 4 = 5 that you might just go right ahead with it, knowing good and well that 4 and 4 does not equal 5. So you've got to consider the mathematics of a thing.
One thing you mentioned, and there's a lot here that I want to expand upon. When you're talking about the mathematics and that situation where like you found 4 great spots to kill a giant, and if you hunted them all at the same time, you quadrupled your odds. Now, how would you go about hunting 4 spots at the same time, like when you're explaining that?
Okay, by finding, say you've got 4 good heavy corridors, all of them got buck sign on it. Well, if you carry those out, say they're in the same patch of woods, if you carry those out far enough and they come up on a ditch, the head of a ditch, and they all are forced together because they're going around that particular ditch, then you have, most good funnels I hunt have 4 or more trails coming together. So you're quadrupling your chances of success. So actually, mathematically, you've got the same success in one day as you have going back somewhere before you find where they come together and hunting the individual travel corridors on 4 different days. It's all simple mathematics. That is so important because there's just so many days of prime rut. And during those days, if the temperature, here's something that really will throw your expectations in a whirlwind. And there's nothing we can do about it. There's a few things in trophy hunt that will affect our success that we can do nothing about. let's say you're hunting a wildlife managed area to begin with, so you're not got a great number of bucks you might consider a trophy. And let's say you go in there and get set up in a tight funnel where 4 or 5 trails come together, where that buck is gonna, if he's traveling long distance and don't even know the area, he'll hit a trail and go down it, because to begin with, that's the best way to find girls. And the next place is he knows that that's probably a safe route, and will work the terrain like he needs to, so he won't have to go down a steep hill. So he'll hit a trail, or he may not even hit a trail. He may just come up on a big, deep ditch. And you've seen them old bucks walk stiff-legged in the rut. Increased movement in their age, get them arthritis, and they'll go around that. And before you know it, they're going right around it the same way all the other deer are going around it. The thing about a funnel is the same thing that funnels does and other deer that makes those trails going around the funnel will funnel mature bucks when they get to moving, of course. But anyway, let's say you've got a great place, and let's say you say, well, I'm hunting wildlife managed area. I know my expectations are not great, but I have done what Bobby said. I've quadrupled my chances. And then let's say the first week of November, let's say from the 1st to the 6th or 7th, is unseasonably warm. Let's take this into consideration, because it seems like more and more we're having warm temperatures during the rut. I don't think humans has a thing to do with it, but we just have to accept that fact. Back years ago around here when I was growing up, we'd have 5 or 6, 7 big snows a year. Now it's very odd to have one. So let's say it's very warm that first week of November, and the bucks maybe travel an hour in the morning, maybe an hour in the evening, maybe an odd cookie might run in the middle of the day, but the biggest part of their movement is going to be during dark hours when it's a little cooler. Now let's just say we switched that temperature, and now let's just say we've got a week with the highs in the 50s. Then your expectations can really rise. You can test your theory, because instead of having 1 or 2 hours in the morning, maybe 1 hour in the evening, 3 hours of buck movement, you've got 12 hours. Now what does that do to the mathematics? Shoots them sky high. So expectations, mathematics, and time devoted to the task are all paramount in the chances of success, and a few other things that I often stress. So it's the temperature at the right time is one of the greatest things. Every technique in the world won't work if there's no mature bucks in those woods. Same exact thing if the temperatures are such that they're not moving. They have to move, and move a lot, for one of them rare giants on public land to come by you. But if it's cold, you've increased your odds 12 times over, say, 12 hours, 12 times over 3 hours. So the mathematics again. So many people has been discouraged here lately because they thought they was going to kill a good buck. They think they have things kind of figured out, and then before you know it, they've got warm temperatures. So that's when I hunt my long-range funnels. I start about November 3rd through the month of November. I expect the greatest success from the 3rd to about the 8th. But now I do use other tactics. I do hunt a mature buck in his individual core area from about October 25th until about November 3rd. I don't know how we got off onto that, but so many people find a big scrape or a big sign, and they get real excited. You know, buck's in there 1st October making a sign as he's going through at night, checking on does and whatever, and he makes a big sign. They get excited and they'll set up, and by the middle of October, they have destroyed their chances of success. Pressured big woods deer do not move in daylight that early in the year. There's occasionally an odd cookie. This 7.5-year-old deer we caught a rattlesnake here in the corner was one of them. There was 4 or 5 people hunting that property. And normally in that case, during the rut, they'll get killed at 2.5 or 3.5 or 4.5, 5.5. He just happened to make it by with that characteristic to move outside the rut. during daylight. Very few have it. A few will have it. That's why managed property where you control the hunting pressure is so important. You got a great 3.5-year-old. Well, normally he'd get killed if he had a personality to move in daylight outside the rut. But since you're only allowing yourself to hunt or a friend or two, and you're saying that deer is off limits, then that deer will reach maturity, and you can kill him first day of season sometimes. I killed that deer October 1st. I noticed over the years that he was one of them that would move outside the rut. And generally speaking, in a hunting area, the older they get, the more nocturnal they get. But he still had that characteristic to move outside the rut during daylight. So if they don't move outside the rut during daylight, though, October 25th seems to be the secret time. From here all through the Midwest, it's about the same. Now, if you've got an unusually warm spell, then I won't hunt that early. But once I find a big mature buck's core area, then I'll look for a short-range funnel inside his core area where 2 or 3 of his travel corridors, his trails come together, or I'll look for a big major scrape, and then I'll be ready to go. I'm waiting for October 25th, the first cold snap after, say, October 20th, the first good cold snap. Temperatures and rut movement then will pull him in the daylight, and you'll have a chance from about October 25th to about November 3rd. Now, after that, when the does stop popping in, then usually his scrape gets abandoned and his core area gets abandoned, and he's gone trying to hook up with the first hot doe he can find, like all the other bucks. That's when the woods explodes. November 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th. You think, man, I seen no bucks. And then yesterday, they were running everywhere. That's when that period, and particularly if it hits with a cold snap, that they move all day, then you're going to see them running everywhere.
Bobby, one thing I really want to dive even more on is the word expectation, because I know that's something that has bit me in the butt in the past, whether it's looking for a certain quality deer and maybe just that property doesn't have them in abundance to the point that they're not saying easy to find, but
they exist.
Yeah, they have to exist there in order to kill, even like where we're at. If you want to kill 140-inch deer, you need to be on a place that actually has some 140-inch deer, because there's some places we hunt. I've never even seen one, never seen one on trail camera, don't know anyone's ever killed one that big on some of the properties that we hunt. And expectations, I think, is a really big point of that, but also understanding when you're spending time in the field hunting, what your expectation is based off what you're seeing, and staying with it even when it's not the greatest conditions, and having your expectations set because of that. So what do you think people get wrong when setting expectations when it comes to bow hunting?
Well, they set unrealistic expectations for the area they're hunting. If you want to kill a 180-inch deer in public ground in Tennessee or in some big woods where there's no farmland, you've got to realize it may take you a lifetime. Whether you want to accept that. If you set your goal for a 180-inch deer, but you'll shoot any 140-inch deer in the woods, your expectations are out of line with reality of what you're doing, because there's probably 20 or 30 more 140s than there are 160s. And there's probably 20 or 30 more 160s than there are 180s. So if you will settle for a 140, then you've got 20 140s to kill, and 20 150s to kill, and 20 160s to kill, and your life is over because your expectations are out of line with what you're doing. You cannot settle for anything less. People say, I'd like to shoot a giant, then they'll shoot, 140 coming. I just can't pass that deer up. You'll never shoot anything bigger because there's a lot more of them in the woods. Very odd would be the situation where the first buck by you was a giant that you had your goal set on. So not only expectations ties in with discipline there, a whole lot. So people just don't understand. They don't understand how expectations tie in and how discipline. But if your goal is to shoot a 180, like I said, anywhere, a 180 is huge anywhere. You can't have high expectations. Your expectations has to be, it may take me 3 years. And if they're not, you may start questioning your technique. You might start questioning yourself as a hunter. Well, myself as a hunter has nothing to do with anything but my ability to stick with it, to put the time in, and my ability to learn certain techniques like I teach or certain people teach. A lot of people connect failure with self-worth, and they get down on themselves, they get depressed, and may keep that depression for years. They may overeat, they may do stuff detrimental without even knowing it to themselves because they did not live up to their expectations when in reality it was their expectations that was out of line with reality. So if your expectations is to kill a 180-inch deer on public land in Tennessee, don't get discouraged because you've hunted for 3 years and ain't killed it. You have to understand that that's what my expectations must be. That will let you stick with it longer, and that won't let you go chasing rabbits down empty holes. That won't let you go try a technique that really, there's so much garbage out there on the internet. Most of these big deer that people kill, young people, they jump to different states and kill them right over bait. You can tell with the pictures they're over bait. Some of them don't try to hide it. And even in Tennessee, we got a bunch of yahoos around here that bait up big bucks and kill them. And people see that, and they get down on themselves, not realizing that guy ain't got a clue. And that's fine for people to do that. You know, a lot of people fake it until they make it. Then they'll sit down like this and give a lot of techniques and give a lot of theories and a lot of ways to hunt, when really they hadn't learned to hunt themselves. And what they're saying is an empty hole as far as chasing rabbits down. So people will sit a while, they'll use a good practical theory. Okay, I see how hunting a place where four trails come together would increase my mathematical odds. And they'll try that a year or two. And they'll see all this John Blow over here is killing these big deer. Well, he's killing it over bait, and he may or may not say that. And they think, well, he's doing it, you know. I'm going to listen to him and see what he's doing. And he's sitting there telling stuff that ain't really beneficial because he don't want to say you put a bait pile and you get up here over it. But so many people are doing that today. And they're on the internet all the time with big bucks, so people want to hear what they got to say. So before you know it, they're on the internet, they're on podcast or whatever, talking about their ways of doing it. And then people will, well, that sounds good. I'm going to do whatever he said there. Boy, you do that, and you can chase rabbits down empty holes for years. And I think it's bad. I think it's bad that people's putting out information out there that's just not practical. Old woodsman like me can see through that. And I'm happy for that person killing big deer. Ever how he kills them over bait, if he enjoys that and that's his way of hunting, I'm happy for him. I mean, they're good guys. I've met a lot of good guys. There's nothing wrong with that. What I'm saying is be careful when you follow certain people. Just make sure that their techniques are valid, or understand. Question them more. Well, how are you? Are you killing all of them over bait, or try to find out more? There's a couple of poachers in the county. When I was pretty young, I still had things figured out pretty good, but they had a wall full of trophies. They don't compare to mine. Legal hunting, the way I hunt, is the most successful way. But they shoot them at 9, whatever, over bait. I can talk to a man for 1 minute and know whether he is the real deal or not. And if he's not, I don't care how many deer he's got on his walls. My eyes don't see them, because I can talk to a man for 5 minutes and know if he's a real hunter or a real woodsman, or if he's cheating, you know. And I'm not saying hunting over bait is cheating if it's legal. I'm just saying that don't let that guy tell you to go out in the big woods and do this and this when he's doing it another way that he don't want to admit, and then you're chasing that technique. You may have a good technique to begin with, a good solid technique. You may have studied the woods and understand, well, I've got big sign here and I think I can set up on this sign. And then after a year or two, maybe it not work. Maybe you had a hot November, and then next year maybe you didn't get to hunt as much. Those two things are paramount. You got to be able to spend a lot of time in the woods when it's cold, when they're moving all day, and you wasn't successful. And then you get on the internet and start listening to everything in the world. Before you know it, you're really confused. I like to strip it of its modifiers and get rid of the confusion. And look at 2 or 3 basic points. You know, I stress 3 basic points. So I don't even know if I answered your question. But
Well, what's the 3 basic points that you stress?
hunting during the rut, when daylight. Now this is don't misunderstand me. This is not managed land where you've got a bunch of 3 and 4 and 5 year olds that's never been hunted that may have a personality to move outside the rut. This is big woods hunting in the real world where other people are hunting and shooting young bucks and maybe wildlife managed. Now understand that. This is big woods hunting. This is woodsmanship. Hunting once the temperature and the time pulls him in the daylight, and stand out of the woods until then, and not educating him that you're in there after him and run him off. So hunting during the rut, hunting funnels, the mathematics of it. And then, of course, time. Time and hunting funnels and hunting at the right time all add up to the same exact thing. They increase the mathematical odds that deer will walk in front of you. Let's say you hunt 5 days during the rut, or you hunt 1 day. 1 day increases the mathematical odds. Hunting a funnel where 4 travel corridors come together compared to hunting where 1 do. Both of them, now you've got 8 times the mathematical odds because you've hunted 4 days in a place that 4 of them come together. And then you're hunting at the time of year they're moving during the rut, 4 times more, let's say, than outside the rut. Then you just increased your mathematical odds again 4 times. So pretty simple. You hear everything on the internet. This sounds pretty simple compared to that. But that is empty rabbit holes. And they're shooting them over bait. But they come up with this wild stuff that they dreamed up their head, and they took what me and some more people said, they've added to it, and before you know it, they've got a pretty good sounding thing there, but trouble of it is it's just mirrors.
How does confidence play a factor for you, but also, I guess, just any bow hunter going out there, like you building the woodsmanship, putting the effort, the time? How does confidence play a factor?
Confidence is exactly the same thing as expectations. If your expectations are in line with reality, then you have the confidence to not go chasing rabbits down empty holes, and you have the confidence to sit there 5 days when the first 4 days you hadn't seen a buck decent, and the 5th day that the giant comes by you. That's where confidence plays on. It's the same thing as expectations, and it gives you the time, the ability to stick with it. You ever during the rut drive through the Midwest or anywhere and see a giant buck running across a field or crossing a road? What in the world? What? Now, how can I capitalize on that? It's easy. You hunt at the end of a tall fence he runs on and has to go around. That's a funnel. Or you hunt on the end of a deep ditch he comes up on and has to go around. Those bucks are traveling during the rut. They're traveling for miles. They're going long distances. They're trying to hook up with that first doe. Those are the deer I kill. They're giants. The only reason you ever see them is that time of year. Usually it's November 3rd through about the 7th. There are giants that you could never imagine was even anywhere around. Nobody even ever seen them. I can kill them because I'm hunting a place that will force them to be there when they're traveling those long distance travels.
I want to talk about another one of your favorite words too, which you got a quote on the wall up here about it, and that's effort. Can you talk about what that means to you and that quote that you've got here framed next to us?
Yeah, the quote says, without effort, something awful takes place in a person's life. Nothing. You know, I don't know how you instill good work ethics in someone. I think passion is what does it. But I'm 70 years old, and I've moved countless stands this week. I'm out there all the time working. You can't succeed in anything in life at a high level without effort. You can't sit back and expect it to come to you. And so many jealous individuals see me get recognized on a world level in my archery, my traditional archery, and my bow hunting. And they're jealous. They say, he don't deserve that. I deserve it just as much. Well, the one thing that separates me from them is effort. And they'll never understand that. They think it should be handed to them. They have a right to it, to the recognition I get just as much as I do. Well, come and follow me around for a week and let's see. Me and Joe Miles, we got a joke. He spent a few nights with me here when we have a class where I take people and show them funnels and teach them about that. And Joe spent a few days with me during 2 classes we had. And I was up at 2 o'clock in the morning. He could hear a drill running, or I'd be, man, don't you ever sleep? I said, Joe, how do you think I've accomplished what I have? I said, I make good use of those hours between 1 o'clock a.m. and 4 that so many people like you waste. So we often talk about that and have a good time with it. But effort comes in a lot of ways. It can be physical or it can be mental, But that goes back to just time devoted to a task is paramount. I might not be out there moving stands or looking for a tight funnel. I may have them figured out, but I may be calculating too. Time devoted to a task is just so important. So that takes effort. It's easy to sit and watch TV for 5 or 6 hours, or get on the internet and be a hero. Bash other people. That's pretty easy. So many people want to rise up to somebody that's successful's level by putting them down. If you put them down, then you're higher than them. But they don't want to do it the right way, the difficult way, by putting effort to the task, So effort is another one of those words that I found over a long period of time looking back at life that is so important that most people do not realize the value of. Another is knowledge. Most people have no idea to the value of knowledge. They'll get excited about something, and I'm a hands-on guy, and they want to rush right in. Well, the only way to learn anything, without knowledge, there's no life. Knowledge is paramount to life. The only way to learn anything is by knowledge. And the only way to advance is by knowledge. Let's say you're shooting a bow and arrow at a certain way, and you've got a certain ability there. You can shoot 1,000,000 arrows just like you're shooting them now. And once your muscles are tuned, you'll not get no better. How do you advance? Somebody that's competent. There's a lot of good archery coaches out there. Rod Jenkins is a very good one in traditional archery. There's several. But somebody very competent can come and tell you something. Hey, you're not doing this that you need to be doing. Or you need to stop doing this. You have just gained knowledge, new knowledge. And once you practice that knowledge, you become efficient at it, then you have jumped up a degree. So the only way to advance in anything that you're doing now is to gain new knowledge, correct knowledge. And I talk about that a lot in my new book. But so many people are so invested in protecting their own egos that they can't learn. If you do not mine the precious ore of combined knowledge, and not only combined knowledge for generation, then you'll always be shallow and superficial. So when I put on my classes, I noticed 1 or 2 guys that had a pretty good reputation, hunted on some shows, standing back. They didn't want me to ease up there and ask them a question and them not be able to answer it. So I noticed them standing back. You ought to get up there and get engaged in anything. Get up there and get engaged in it. Everybody you meet in life knows something that you don't. And if you'll engage them, you might get that information. I have always had a hunger and thirst for information. And I think that's why I have succeeded at the little degree I have in life. So knowledge, not only knowledge from one person, but accumulated knowledge is so important. It has to be correct knowledge. As we said earlier, there's a lot of stuff out there that ain't correct. But correct knowledge is so important to success. So there's a lot of words that, there's about 5 or 6 words that I'm really working on writing a lot about. And in my new book, I talk about mathematics and how important it is. I talk about expectations and how important it is. I talk about knowledge and how important it is. And in my book, I don't just talk about for the hunt. I talk about in all avenues of life how important they are. So looking back at my life, I wasn't very good in English now. I took 8 classes to get out of high school. And my teacher never stressed those words to me. I wish she had. But if I had some advice for young people, I'd explain 4 or 5 words and the importance of them, not only to bow hunting, but definitely to bow hunting, but also to all avenues of life.
On the knowledge and learning aspect, you mentioned that you're always trying to learn from other people and you're trying to soak up knowledge wherever you can. I'm really curious when it comes to your deer hunting. Who was one of the people early on who you really latched onto and tried to learn a lot from? You know, you mentioned that you grew up around a lot of small game hunters. So who is one of your, I guess, early mentors, if you had one?
Nobody in this area. I was kind of the premier one, I guess. I mean, I was pretty backward back in, and we was awful poor. And I was out in the woods as much as anybody, and familiarity added to knowledge. And there wasn't no great deer hunters here. There was a few guys that killed a lot of deer through different ways, driving deer or dogging them, had good dogs, and learned that technique. But as far as still hunting techniques, there was nobody around here that was able to do what I was doing at an early age. But you was just hoping to kill a doe or a young buck even, because they didn't get by much. I mean, they weren't mean deer anyway, and these old mountain boys would hunt them down. But now later on, I learned a lot from the writings of Roger Rothair and Gene Wenzel, and M.R. James come out with a magazine, Bow Hunter magazine, and first you'd ever hear about whitetail deer. All of Fred Bear's movies I talked about before were on big game and stuff, but really whitetail deer, and it's still considered the greatest game animal in the world. If you can outsmart a trophy whitetail buck, you can outsmart anything. And when I say outsmart them, I'm not necessarily talking about some of the techniques used today, but I'm talking about outsmarting them. But Gene and Roger Rothair, I think, wrote a 3-part series that later became a book. And he really... I would see strapes and rubs, and I knew deer made them, but he had a chance to study a lot more deer than I did in these mountains in Ohio. They stalked them there first, and he began to really figure out about analyzing strapes and rubs and how they're rolling breeding, the breeding ritual, and that was I learned quite a bit from him. Later on, I become good friends with Roger and Gene, very good friends with both of them, and Roger's been here at my house. I've been to his. We hunted a lot together and shared a lot of knowledge together. And but as far as just a local mentor, a great deer hunter, back then they was guys that's killing deer, but they was killing them any way they could. If they couldn't spotlight them, they'd run over them. You know, but yeah. So getting back to knowledge. There's 2 words in knowledge. One is learning, one is unlearning. So there's a lot of people out there right now afraid that are confused or chasing rabbits down empty holes. They have to understand that maybe they need to unlearn. And a lot of people with inflated egos, and that's fine. You know, a lot of people fake it until they make it, and they're out there faking it, and they're afraid to come up and ask questions. They just try and catch on what they can, you know, without just putting themselves out there too far. Come on, guys, you know. If I went into some aspect of, say, bowling, you know, I believe I'd be a sponge. I don't believe I'd try to act like I was, even if I hit a strike, even if I hit one strike, I don't think I've just always been real hungry for knowledge and for getting it from anywhere I could. But now you got to, I guess the confusing part is that, does that make sense or not? When you got a guy killing giant deer or 4 or 5 140-inch bucks, one every year or 2 every year, hunting different states, you need to do a little investigating, I think. A man needs to do a little investigating, Look at them pictures. If there's 4 deer in the picture, he's sending you a trail picture. Look at this deer, I'm going to kill him, here in a few days. They forward picture in the deer, and his head's up and stretched out like that. You might think, well, that deer might be eating corn. He may, is that legal in that state? Well, yeah, okay. You just need to do a little investigating and use the mind that you are given by God. If I say hunting 4 corridors in one day increases your odds as good as hunting 4 separate corridors in 4 days, then does that make common sense? Well, yes, it does. Okay. I'm going to apply that tactic. Then is where expectations come in. You're not successful, then you want to go try something else. It's because your expectations were out of line. So that word is so important in trophy whitetail deer hunting.
Now, going back to the knowledge, how do you apply knowledge in the field? It's one thing to soak it up and learn from other individuals who have more experience and be able to learn from that, and also learn from your personal experience and build knowledge in the field. But how do you apply that knowledge in the field as a hunter?
That quote this young man right here mentioned a while ago, without effort, something awful takes place in your life. Nothing. You can apply it if your expectations are right and you don't quit and give up. If you're tough, if you practice some mental and physical toughness. I mean, it's not easy. I'll be honest with you. To be successful in anything is not easy. You have to have some grit about you. Grit is a very important word. Stamina or grit. You have to find ways to overcome the negative of hunting all day, day after day after day. So to apply the knowledge takes effort, and you got to understand that going in. If you say, I'm not the type guy I'm just not mentally tough enough to handle it, don't have the expectations out of line with that reality. So there's a lot of things that tie together there. But a lot of times, if you see the benefit, you'll find ways to overcome the negative of it. The negative of spending all day, day after day. If you know the benefit, if you can see the benefit, and if that is another important word that we hadn't mentioned yet, passion. If that is your passion. I believe passion is inherent. I believe it's something that, I talk a lot in my new book about DNA and how important it is. My DNA is not such that I could ever be the president of the United States. Can't do it. It's not there. I can't never be a great swimmer and jump off the high board and do them flips. It's not there. But guess what? I've never had passion for that. I believe our passion is in line with something inherent in our DNA that we got from maybe not our parents, but maybe our grandparents. I've never seen anyone great. I mean, great in life that didn't have a parent or grandparent that was also great at something. Maybe not that exact same thing, but at something. You have to follow your passion. So many people will watch somebody do something. They want to do it for the wrong reason. Well, I don't like him. I think I can beat him at it. Or, man, look at the recognition they got. I think that I can do that and get that recognition doing that same thing. And they're really not passionate about it. If you're not passionate about it, you will never excel to a high degree. And I think parents need to understand this about their kids. I was talking to a guy yesterday, and he said, I told him this idea, and he said, I pushed my kid too hard in ball. so many times because I'm a great archer say I wanted my kid to be a great archer. And what I want to actually do, I love them and I want to see them happy like I was. Plus, I might want to relive some of my success through them. And then I push them into that or push them into ball. I was good at that. And that kid might be miserable. And really, they never really stop to ask them, hey, do you really enjoy this? Is this your passion? Is this really are you excited about this? And they should. Because if that's not their passion and they're just trying to do it to please you, they're never going to excel and they're going to be miserable. And then the parent may push, well, why ain't you practicing this at home? Why didn't you do better at this? Why ain't you putting more time at home in this? And that kid don't know enough to say, it's not my passion. It's your passion. So if you're following your passion, not because you're trying to kill a big buck because your daddy did or because somebody else killed one and a lot of people was giving them that boys, the reason we hunt is very important. If you're doing it because you're passionate about it, then you can sit all day, day after day. But if you're doing it for another reason, for recognition or for another reason, then you're never going to excel at it. And then you're going to sit back on the couch mad because you hadn't, and you're going to get online and start bashing other people that have excelled and try to reach their level that way. So a lot of this ties together.
Pat, that was one of the best examples and descriptions of passion. And I definitely believe, I'm interested in getting your thoughts, that some people are just genetically
predisposed.
I guess that's the best way to put it. Genetically predisposed to be a hunter and someone passionate. And there's some people, it's like you find passions in different things. Like I've got a brother of mine. I've got two brothers. One of them loves to hunt. He's my youngest brother. Very passionate about hunting. The other one used to hunt when he was younger. Doesn't really care about it anymore. He's got other things going on. His passion is water sports and doing stuff like that, messing with boats and working on cars and stuff. But he has a passion for that like I have a passion for hunting. And like my younger brother has a passion for hunting. And it's like I feel like everybody's predisposed to certain passions is how you cultivate that. And that kind of brings up something I want to ask you is from looking at a parent to someone who has young kids that are trying to get them into maybe what the parent sees as their passion is, and the father loves to hunt, trying to bring the kids into it. How do you cultivate that passion for a young kid or for someone you may be mentoring?
Passion can't be cultivated. In my opinion, I'm no psychiatrist, and I didn't go to therapy for 2 or 3 days, so I don't know a lot about this psychology stuff. I got kicked out. But I talk in my book about 5 things that are inherent in my new book, 5 things that are inherent in greatness. And I want to lay some groundwork. And I wish I had the quote in front of me, but just like you said, it's in the generic code. Some people will say, well, he's got a knack for that, or that's second nature to him. I think that is in the DNA. For instance, my family has never played musical instruments. I can't carry a tune in a bucket. I could sing good until I come up with something called tune, and people start telling me that that's important too, besides loudness. But anyway, there's some people pick a musical instrument and just play anything. Some people can't play a lick. But you look at the ones that can play. Generally, their parents or their grandparents played or did something very similar to that. So I hope they survive the dog attack if they come in here. But anyway, I think when you say it's second nature or they got a natural talent for it, I think that's in their DNA. I think that's in their code, just like you said. And I think you can try to cultivate passion in somebody that don't have it, and you're not going to do it. But if I have passion for something, of course, nothing cultivates passion like success. For instance, in archery, if I'm teaching a kid archery, I move them real close to the target, and I got a big target. And then they shoot an arrow into the bullseye. And And I say, man, that is great. There's a lot of ways to, you could call it cultivate passion, but you could call it cultivate skill too. This is on the mental side of archery. And if you understand archery like I do, 95% is mental. But the mental only kicks in if you're 100% at the physical. For instance, if you plucked a string, I don't care how your mental game is on certain aspects, you'll never be a good archer. But once the physical gets 100%, then the mental kicks in. Okay, we move a kid close to the target, and I like to tell them, that's the way you shoot. That's the way you shoot. So every time we shoot a bad arrow, you never say, I shot awful. See, if you don't bring your mental up with the physical, if you think you can shoot on this level, but I teach you physically how to shoot on this level, you'll never shoot over this level. You'll never shoot better than you think you can shoot. That is a proven, in sports psychology, that is a proven fact. The Olympic archer sports psychologist, I learned some stuff from him. That's a fact. So that's why you build the mental up with the physical. That's the way I shoot. You never say, I shot a bad arrow. That drops that mental down a notch. You never let nobody around you say, I never let nobody in my class say, I shot bad or that's a bad group. Even if somebody else says it about themselves, your subconscious thinks you're the only person in the world. You just internalized that and you thought you shot bad and that dropped you down. So the psychology of growing passion and growing ability is more complex than most people realize.
What other words are we missing? There are some of these key principles that you kind of live by when it comes to hunting, but also with life.
Well, we've covered, there's let me see, knowledge is the first one, of course. Expectations, it being in line with reality. Time to any task is just paramount and so important. And we got effort, we got passion, and I think there's one more that I've been cultivating lately. That's mathematics. So there's 6, I think, and there's one more that I've been cultivating lately, but I don't want to talk about it until I get a little further along with my thought process on it. But I think those words they're words. They're, a word is it's just a generic something that we made mean something. It's in the word itself. You can't read that word and understand what it means unless you know what it means. So I've found in life, when you're trying to figure something out, I found that a good, concise definition of a word is halfway to understanding the whole process of it. So that's what I think is important. But I don't know why, when you're teaching young people or teaching kids in school, you don't pick out some key stuff. I think that they need to have more real life practicality to these words that they learn how to read and spell. What if somebody sat down and said, now this young person, this word here, knowledge, and tell them the importance of it, and say, don't never be ashamed to ask questions, and expectations. Now, if you've got the wrong expectations, you may get down on yourself when really it was your expectations that was wrong. I just think there's just a few key words that educators need to be teaching more about, but they're just not. They're just not educating kids. They're just passing grades, so many times. But I think those 6 words are so important in trophy bow hunting, and I really stress them in my new book. And I just the longer I live, the more I enjoy writing. Used to, my favorite activity was to shoot my recurve bow out here in the yard and listen to my beagles and watch them run a rabbit around me and have a rabbit race. For a long time, that was my most enjoyable hour or two to spend. But now it's writing. It's sitting down and thinking and writing stuff that I think will help other people later on. People are inherently good, and they deserve to live a good and happy life. And some of them are not, maybe because they just don't understand certain things that you might be able to help them with or tell them. They don't understand, they're not successful in deer hunting because maybe they don't have the knowledge. Maybe their expectations, maybe what is success to them is wrong. Maybe their expectations are incorrect. Maybe they don't have a passion for that. They might do better at something else. Maybe they do not know how to increase their mathematical odds of success. Maybe they're too busy with other things to dedicate the time that needs to be dedicated. So I think if people understood some of these aspects, they could be more successful. They might not be down on themselves or depressed. They might have a better and happier life. And I think that's important.
Well, Bobby, one thing I wanted to bring up to kind of really wrap up this segment of this, I want to say a two-part series here with you. You got a new book coming out, Final Quest. It's actually, by the time this episode comes out, it's about available, but people can go online. Give us a quick rundown of what people should expect about this new book, because I know you have a lot of other books, and they're pretty hard to come by. They sell for a pretty penny. Actually, a buddy of mine just sent me one of your books. I can't not remember which one. I haven't even opened it from the package yet. It might be your last book you did, Lord. Passionate Quest. But explain to the audience, what should they expect from this new book from you, especially if they're a passionate whitetail hunter and specifically a passionate bow hunter as well?
Well, stuff like we talked about here, but a lot more philosophy. Just let me back up. A lot of people's wondering about my other two books. Bow Hunting Trophy Whitetail was written for North American Whitetail Magazine, first and only bow hunting book they've ever published, or deer hunting book. Well, Passionate Quest is about twice that size with twice the information, and it's actually a volume 2 of Bow Hunting Trophy Whitetail. Final Quest, my new book, which will be available for shipping, I think the 22nd or 23rd of September. It's nearly there. It is a volume 2 of Passionate Quest. It has about twice the information, about double the information. Now we're doing 160 limited edition leather-bound copies. And we've been taking pre-orders for a few weeks, and from what I understand, there's like 10 left. So they're just about gone. And you can order them, just get on Joe Miles, Aussie Old Gear website, and you can find how to order them there. But it's about twice the information, but I have so much more philosophies. And I instill in that book passion for the whitetail deer. I say, and it's the heart of a hunter and the passion for a whitetail deer. It's got so much more philosophy. It's just about life in general, and most of the things we've talked about here is in that book. I organize my thoughts on a lot of these subjects for that book, and so a lot of them are in that book. And I think you're going to find that book is something a little different and maybe a little bit better than anything you've read. Not only does it have a lot of philosophies, poems, quotes, even riddles, it has, I think, some of the most in-depth work on techniques of hunting on the 3 points, inside the 3 points that I stressed here that you'll ever read. The funnel section is really, really deep. I analyze funnels like nobody ever has. Whether the funnel's a hard funnel or a soft funnel, hard on one side, soft on the other, long-range funnel or short-range funnel. There's just so much things. I break the funnel down in about 10 different categories. And then inside them categories, then I ask questions. What wind can you hunt it with? How will the thermals affect the funnel? Is it an all-day funnel or a morning funnel, evening funnel? There's is it a one-sided funnel or two-sided funnel? Well, what's the difference in short range and long range? Long range funnels are those bucks hit that I was talking about that's going hard during the rut, traveling long distances. And short range funnel is if I'm set up in a core area on a big buck, and I try to find a short range funnel where he's going around a pond and got 3 of his trails coming together or something of that nature. Long range funnels you may kill a deer there that his core area is 3 miles away. Just a lot of, and I talk about analyzing funnels. A short-range funnel is different. A long-range funnel, the only way to analyze the benefits of a long-range funnel is through an entire rut. Now, if I don't have nothing to hunt but a good funnel that's not a bridge to nowhere, some funnels are bridges to nowhere. They're just made by, you got a bunch of trails coming together because it's a feeding area right over there, and does are going around the ditch to go to the feeding area. That's not what I'm talking about. But if you've got a good long-range funnel, and it's the only one you got to hunt it, but if not, then put that camera on it, and by the end of November, 30 or 35 days later, you'll know the benefit for next year. You might have 3 mature bucks go through it, or 2 mature bucks once, and then another mature buck that you would shoot all of them. Then you know that is a good long-range funnel. That giant has never been seen around here before. I've never seen it before. The biggest deer I've ever seen. I got him on film. Well, that's good information, but don't let your expectations get out of line with reality. Let's say in a 30-day period, you got 3 mature bucks going through it. You got to calculate how much time it will take to be successful, and are you willing to put it in? So much of this ties together.
All right, guys, that's going to wrap up our part 1 episode with Bobby Worthington. You're absolutely not going to want to miss part 2. Part 1 was the mindset of Bobby, kind of how he's developed this skill set over the last 55 plus years of deer hunting. In part 2, we're going to get a lot more to the strategy and strategic aspect of how he's been able to become such a successful bow hunter and sharing that information with you guys. Also, make sure you go check out the new book. Again, Final Quest from Bobby Worthington. Again, the link's down in the show notes below. You can check out the book. We got ours ordered, me and Andrew. So again, you're going to want to get one if you can. Part 2 will come out next week. If you're just now watching this video when it first drops, the episode will be out next Monday. If you're watching this a little bit later, guys, it's going to be linked down in the show notes below. So go check it out. Again, you're not going to want to miss part 1 and again, part 2 episode with Bobby Worthington. So we appreciate y'all watching. Appreciate y'all listening. We'll catch you back here for the next episode of the Southern Outdoorsman Podcast. And remember, guys, y'all stay Southern.